It's the part 2, right? And we stopped here, and we said, ויש ללמוד מחומר העונש וגודל החטא של קורח. We need to learn from the severity and the punishment that Hashem needed to create a new creation, שאין גודל החטא נמדד רק לפי חומר ההסדרה. I said that the sin is not being measured, right? Not being measured only by the warning and the punishment, right? We learned that many times that Hashem is like looking what's behind it. And he says, and ויש עניינים שהפגם שלהם עמוק מאוד. There are sins or things that their blemish is very deep. Even so, when the severity is not specifically explained in the Torah. Why? ומטעם שחטאים אלו פוגמים את הדבקות של כלל ישראל בקדוש ברוך הוא, because this type of sin that the Torah didn't need to really explain us how severe they are, because they're actually detaching ourselves from Hashem. The blemish is to detach from Hashem. And because our purpose is to cleave to Hashem, then anything that can take us away from Hashem is severe. More than the other punishment or other sin that the Torah explaining us in the Torah, right? If you don't eat, if you don't do a brit milah to your son, if you eat non-kosher food, if you transgress the mitzvot aseh, the Torah is giving us punishment. But this thing, it doesn't. Why? Because everybody understands that this is very severe. And that's why it says, וזה שנאמר כאן וידעתם כי נעצו האנשים האלו את השם. It's like these people cursed Hashem. They have like a really argument and they're blaming Hashem, or they don't want to be with Hashem. And we didn't find it in other sin that somebody eating non-kosher food is saying, oh, he have a dispute with Hashem. No, he's evil inclination, he couldn't hold himself. He did something which of course is wrong, but he can make tshuva. But so for this type of thing, like to influence other people to detach from Hashem, this is something like really, really serious. וכעניין זה, אנו מוצאים בתורה בפרשת קדושים תהיו, שעניינה קדש עצמך במותר לך, right? That's the concept of Yaakov Avinu. Be holy in the things that are permissible. And the Torah gave us so many warnings. Even though it's not talking about sins, but just to be holy and to sanctify ourselves with the things that are permissible, which we don't have really isur and onesh, right? It's not forbidden on us. On the contrary, it's permissible. So there are no punishment. And still, the Torah warning us about this Kedusha. Because cleaving to Hashem, it's depending on the Kedusha. And even so that we allow to drink alcohol, but to get drunk and be violent, it's bad. And that will detach us from Hashem, for example. Or to do something that is permitted, but it can cause something negative. In the Rashi, in the name of the Mechilta, it says, Im atem kedoshim, if you are holy, right, separated, behaving according to what Hashem wants, arei atem sheli, then you are mine. And if not, if you're not behaving like holy people, then you are not mine. What could be the severe punishment? She'im lav en atam sheli. Hashem himself is saying, you don't behave according to what I'm asking you, you're on your own. That's the punishment. Ve'im mitzvat kedoshim tiyu. So the mitzvah of to be kedoshim, it's not counted of one of the mitzvot from the Torah, but still, without kedusha, we cannot be together with Hashem. We cannot cleave to Hashem. And that was the word of Hashem to us prior to Kabbalat Torah. Right? It says, "V'atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim," will be a nation of kohanim, of priests, and a holy nation. Because if you are holy, you are mine. If not, not. And that was the Akedama. That was prior to the Kabbalat Torah. That you should be, right? We should be Mamlechet Kohanim. Ainu mean servants. That we are nullified ourselves and we are batelu mevutal to Hashem Yitbarach, and we become a Goy Kadosh. And without cleaving to Hashem, he is mufrach. He's detached from Hashem, and that's the biggest sin, or not the sin even. That's the biggest punishment for us. And then explain the sin of Korach was from this type of sins that are blemishing, are defecting, are cleaving to Hashem. And that's why it was so severe. because החולק על רבו כחולק על השכינה. It's like you have a dispute with the שכינה. וכל המתדבק בתלמיד חכם, anyone that is cleaving to the תלמיד חכם is cleaving to the שכינה. Right? And we learn it so many times. עשה לך רב, right? You have a rab for yourself. You have to have. And it doesn't say if the rab is a great rab, is a small rab, medium rab, a local rab, right? A gadol. No, any rab for that person. He needs to mevatel himself with the rab. And that was the sin of Korach, that he was mechulak, he was divided, right? He was fighting against the yesod, against the fundamental principle of what we just learned about cleaving to your rab. Ask your rab. And that's why he said, for example, Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim ubetocham Hashem. Everybody is holy. We don't need a leader. We don't need a rab. And Hashem is with us. Why are you patronizing on Ka'al Hashem? And he holds that an individual could reach to the level of cleaving to Hashem and he doesn't need a rab. Basically, this is something very interesting that I learned today from Rabbi Aaron Levy. And he always using like an example from things that happening in these days. So he gave an example about the new anti-Semitism, for example, that the new anti-Semitism doesn't go against the Jews. It goes against the state of Israel and the apartheid and how they're hurting the Palestinians, etc. Because they're very liberal and they cannot show that they hate us. So this is what they do. But basically they're aiming higher. So then he goes to the politics and he said that the politicians in Israel, unfortunately, they now accusing the Haredi politician, the one that in the Knesset, and they say, oh, you brainwashed your congregation, you making them to be depend on social security and budgets and so on because they don't work. And every time when there is election, you're using that as a carrot, and then they have to, so they're like slaves. So he said, of course we're not stupid. And the Haredi, nobody forced them to do things, right? It's free will. It's our path. It's our way of life. But he said, but this politician, the secular one, know that they cannot go against the Gedolim, the Rabbanim. So when they talking about the Haredim politician, actually they're talking about the Gedolim, not about the politicians, about the Rabbanim. But they like aiming to the politicians. But actually they don't want us to cleave to the Gedolim, to the Rabbanim, to listen to the Rabbanim. And this is exactly what Korach was doing. And he said, Rabbi Aaron Levi said, and we are not stupid, and we have the Parashat Shavua, and it's exactly what Korach was doing. He was going against Moshe. No, he went against Hashem. Moshe was the messenger, but he aimed higher, and that's why it was so severe, and that's why he goes down alive, Sheola, Chaim Sheola, as Moshe was saying. If a new creation Hashem will create, that nobody sees such kind of a thing, that's appropriate punishment because he come to disconnect the Klal Israel from cleaving to Hashem. That's the biggest blemish. Because if he would fulfill his thought, Korach, his plan, his conspiracy, we were doomed. We couldn't get to Hashem. And the only way to us is by having a Rav, a mediator, a connection, like Moshe was our connection to Hashem. And we're going to finish with this. And then he said here, and we learned it before, and according to what we just learned, we can understand all the other severe sins in the Torah that we're talking about, the generation in the desert, right? Bamidbar, that they're not the same thing. And for example, like Rashi was explaining about, we were learning a few parashiot ago, on the mitonenim, the one that complains, right, about the man. So we don't want to eat the man anymore. We want to have meat. We want to have steaks, ribeye steaks with the bone. But he says, En mitonenim el lashon alila. They were looking for an excuse. The excuse was the meat because they want to have desire and they want to detach themselves from Hashem, and that's why they were punished so severe. So Hashem is looking at what's behind the motive. What's the motive for the sin? If it is detaching from Hashem, that's very bad, right? We cannot and we shouldn't. and we shouldn't. And this is all the inyan kol hachataim that the Torah was talking about, and the Bamidbar. And he said, but then he said here that the evil inclination, or the sitra acha, the other side, was fighting very strong against us. Why? Why all of this thing happened? Because he doesn't want us to go into Eretz Israel. And we need to understand there are so many details. For example, something that happened actually served Korach, because the people, they were 1 year in Har Sinai. They were about to go into the land of Israel. And suddenly they said, we don't need to keep the Torah and mitzvot while we are in the desert. When we go to Eretz Israel, we'll keep the Torah and the mitzvot. But here in the desert, we don't need to. For some, it makes sense, because it was a mistake. And Korah said, okay, that's a good thing. Okay, let's use it. Let's use it as an ammunition. And then his wife came and she told him, okay, ask Moshe if tzitzit needs a tchelet. So if the garment is all tchelet, or if a house that needs a mezuzah, if you have a Sefer Torah, does it need? Basically what he wanted to tell him, he said, we don't need a leader. If everything is blue, then you don't need a tzitzit with the tchelet, because it's all blue. And if you have a Sefer Torah, you don't need a mezuzah. She told him, stupid, well, what this have to do with the other one? Right? So the evil inclination, the sitra acha, was trying very hard. And he said, and all of these sins were mechuvan, they were aimed, again, to detach themselves from Hashem. So our holy sages, they're determined to ikara ikarim, for the main principle, 3 things, emuna, gedusha, and Shabbat Kodesh, that they are always capable to bring us to cleave to Hashem. And we need to learn from this parshiot how they were, these things, what's the value about gedusha, emuna, faith in Hashem, and keeping Shabbos. Because the sins that take us away from Hashem, they are so severe, then doing the opposite, doing the positive thing and cleaving to Hashem by having a Kedusha, having a Emunah, and keeping Shabbos, then that will be probably a great reward. Right? But that will bring us closer to Hashem. And that's the biggest reward, just to be with Hashem. Imagine to know all the knowledge and everything that there is and we don't know. So that's why it was so severe. And that's why Hashem needed to create a new creation, because a regular punishment was not appropriate. It was not in the same level, in the same scale. And Korach basically, and the other people that were dragged behind him, everybody was punished. Everybody was punished. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great Shabbos.